Hi, my name is Ido Angel, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about my best not selling at all book, well, because it's not really out in English yet, called Attention, the Atom of Consciousness. And if you're a philosophy lover, if you're interested in questions such as how does our universe work? What's the point of everything? Why is there something rather than nothing? Why would anything respond to anything in the first place? If you're interested in these kind of questions, then this book might be of interest to you because it says something rather new about attention. It says that attention might be the answer to most of these questions because it's a major fundamental force in our universe. In fact, it's so fundamental that it might be even more fundamental than time and space and gravity and all these big names. How can that be? Let's talk about it a little bit. Well, to begin with, we would need to distinguish between two types of attention. The first type is our day-to-day attention, if you like, attention as we are used to talking about it, which I call distinctive attention. Because what we do there is we focus or concentrate our senses upon one thing rather than other thing. And this allows us to notice things that we wouldn't have noticed otherwise. This is why it's distinctive. All right? And there are two important points to talk about in relation to this type of attention, distinctive attention. The first important point is that to be able to perform this type of attention, to be able to pay this type of attention, you need to have a mind. You need to have a conscious mind. Because whether the action of paying attention happens consciously or subconsciously, the result of it has to be conscious because it's noticing something, and noticing something is an experience. And for experience, you have to have a conscious mind. So that's the first important point to remember about this type of attention. The second point is that what we notice, when we notice something which is already there, which is already present. And that's also important because when we talk about the second type of attention, we see that it doesn't work this way there. So the second type of attention, which I call creative universal attention, is completely different. First, it's different because you don't need to have a mind for it. You don't need to have consciousness for it. This is why it's universal, because it can happen everywhere. It's basically the answer to the question, why would anything react to anything in the first place? We'll talk about it soon, but for now, the most important thing is that you don't have to have a conscious mind for it to work. It happens in particles, it happens in stones, in plants, in animals, in human beings, in planets, in galaxies. You can even say, to some extent, that gravity is space-time's attention to mass. So, you don't need to have a mind in order to pay this type of attention. It's everywhere. The second thing about it is that if in the first type of attention we were noticing something which was already present, then here it's not noticing, it's creating, hence creative universal attention, it's creating the things themselves. That's a very, very, very strange thing to say. How does attention create things? Well, we need to ask ourselves, what are things? In order to answer this question, we tend to look at reality, in the way we experience reality, we tend to look at it as being made out of things, right? We take the bottom-up approach and we say that the smaller things are the building blocks for the larger things, right? We have subatomic particles, which create atoms, which create molecules, which create materials, which create objects, which creates larger objects, which then go up and up until the largest object of all, which is the universe, or the multiverse, if you want to subscribe to this theory. So the universe, the reality is made out of things. And we have the laws of physics, the constants of nature, of the universe, which tell us how things interact with each other. And the interesting thing about about that is that it never stops. There is no second in the universe naked of interaction. Everything is interacting with everything all the time. But this raises an interesting philosophical question, because if things interact with things all the time, that means they're changing all the time, right? They're evolving all the time. And if they're changing all the time, then when would we stop to call something a thing rather than something else? For example, why would I call this table a table now, but in a million years' times I would call it dust? When is the second that the table stops being a table and turns into dust? When does the table lose enough table qualities and gain enough dust qualities to stop being a table and start being dust? Is there such a place in time that this happens? When does the seed start being a tree? When does it stop being a seed and starts being the tree from which the table is made? Is there such a thing? Is there such a point in time? Well, the answer is that maybe there isn't. Maybe calling a thing a thing is a decision, a conscious decision that we're making. We're just grouping a bunch of atoms and giving it qualities and naming them. But this is exactly the difference from our experience of reality than reality itself. In reality itself, there is no table and there is no actual dust. It's like in the movie The Matrix. There is no spoon. The spoon is a story. Now, this is very interesting, but it's not really new. You can even go 2,500 years ago to the Buddha, who said exactly the same, said that in the second noble truth, he said that our suffering is from our murky vision of reality. We tend to grasp things as being static and independent, while in reality, as it is, everything is codependent, everything is interconnected and ever-changing. But we don't have to go 2,500 years back in time. We can go to our century, to our days, to Professor Carlo Rovelli, who was a very, very smart man, who said that exactly that our reality, he's a theoretical physicist, and he said that our reality isn't made out of things, it's made out of interactions. And that's a great thing to realize, but it also raises another philosophical, maybe even paradoxical question, which is, if reality isn't made out of things and it's made only out of interactions, then what's an interaction? Where is the interaction taking place between what and what? If there are no things, then what's interacting with what? So maybe there are no interactions as well? That's a difficult question. Well, my book wants to suggest that this interaction is called attention, and that it doesn't happen between things at all. This is not the first type of attention that we talked about, which is distinctive attention. It's the universal creative attention that is the base of this interaction between anything and anything, and that it's not really an interaction between things. It's an interaction between data, raw data, which is abstract, and specific information. It's actually what you may call data processing into information. Now, what's data processing in information? We can talk about, let's say, a ray of light hitting a flower, then bouncing from the flower right into my retina, to my eyes. Well, if everything is working properly in my brain, in my processor, then I would be able to process this raw data of photons bouncing from the flower into my retina and process it into information, into the image of a flower in my mind. But if something's wrong, if the part in my brain responsible for absorbing this data is faulty, then this data won't be processed and it will just remain data. It will remain in reality as it is, and I will have no experience of it. So attention is exactly this force which processes data into information, which processes the abstract into the specific. And if you remember the second important point about attention that we talked about, then not only it's universal, but it's also creative, because it doesn't allow us to just notice something. It's creating the presence of the thing itself, meaning it's not creating the existence of the thing because there are no things, but it's creating the presence of the thing, which is the experience of the thing. Now, the difference between something existing and something being present is quite simple. Remember when we were kids, the teacher in class would make a presence checkup, right? She would call the names of the kids, and whoever is present would say his name. Now, the kids that were not present, most of the time me included, would exist somewhere else, but they were not present in class. So presence is something very specific. It's not objective, it's something you can even say subjective, because it relates to the question, are you present somewhere very, very specific? Presence is the result of attention, because attention is exactly this question of whether something is present at this place and time, right? You can even think about it philosophically speaking, not scientifically speaking, but philosophically speaking, like quantum physics, like superposition. The superposition is raw data, right? The superposition is at least much more abstract than the position itself of a particle. And when a particle is in a superposition, the only way it can collapse into its single position, the only way that data can turn into information is with attention, is if something is being checked regarding the position of or whatever of this particle, right? So creative universal attention is the action of data processing, of abstract data processing into specific information. And this happens everywhere. This is why anything would respond to anything. And this is the essence of interaction between anything and anything else. But how does it happen? What's the process of the attention itself? Well, you can think about it like a string. Let's say that everything in our universe is connected to everything else with invisible small strings. It's a metaphor, of course, but and these strings are in its default position are loose. And if a string is loose, then you can't really do anything with it. It's just there, hanging loose. You can't, if you think of a violin, a loose violin string cannot play sound, right? It has to be stretched in order to play sound. So the default state of this string connecting between everything is loose. But then the second state of the string is not the stretching itself. There's something important going on before that, and that's the intention of becoming stretched towards something. Now, if you take the word attention, the etymology of the word, then you see that it's made out of two Latin words. The first being ad, which means towards, and the second ten, which means to stretch. So it's stretching towards. Attention is stretching towards. It's not just any stretching. It's not just generally stretching. It's stretching towards, meaning stretching towards somewhere or something very specific. So if something is stretching towards something specific, then it's not objective anymore. It's already subjective in a way. It's already loaded with intention to become stretched up to a specific, very specific point. And it's very important because this is exactly presence. Presence is a very specific question. It's not just existence. It's not, this is why attention is not creating things. It's creating only the presence of the thing. And the presence is the specific or subjective stretching of this string of attention between one piece of data and another piece of data, right? So we have the first state of the string, which is loose, and then we have the intention of becoming stretched towards something. Then the third state would be the actual stretching itself, which is not a linear process, because if everything can respond to anything else, that means that everything has the ability to absorb something from something else. This is why two magnets, when we put them close to each other, respond to each other, because they can absorb something. They can absorb something from the second magnet, right? They can absorb something from each other. It's not like a sponge absorbs something. It's more like a mirror reflects something. So if everything is like a mirror reflecting everything else, then when this string begins to stretch between two things, then it's not linear. It's more like a Mobius string, because it has two surfaces but only one dimension of looking at each other. But it's like two mirrors recursing into each other, and then spinning, the visual would spin, the reflection would spin much more, much faster, if you like, between them, thus creating the experience, thus creating the collapse of the data and the processing of the data from being abstract into something very, very, very specific. And this is, of course, an infinite process, because the reflection never ends. And that's what's driving our universe in a way. And then only after we have the loose state, we have the intention state, and then we have the stretching state, we have the final state, which is the stretched string. And it's not just any stretch string, it's a very specifically stretched string. Like in a violin, you have, if you want to play the note C, then you have to play exactly a specifically stretched string in order to play that exact specific note. And only then you can play attention on it. Only then you can play the first type of attention on it, which is distinctive attention. So you have to have the process of universal creative attention, which is creating the relative presence of anything towards anything else, and only upon that you can go on to have distinctive attention and notice something which is now already present. Basically, that's what's the book about. It's explaining, of course, in a much more elaborate way about everything, about all this process. And it also has a part talking about how we can use all the things that we understand in the book about the process of attention everywhere, in particles and in plants and whatever. How can we, as conscious minds, as people, can use it in our day-to-day lives? In many ways, even in parenting, in relationships, in everywhere. It also raises questions about, for example, free will. Because if there are no things, then the problem with free will is not that we claim that we have a higher, entity responsible for our choices. It's that if we're standing in a junction and we want to choose between left and right, then the actual truth of reality is that there is no left and there is no right. So there is no existence of things, there's only presence of things. This changes your view about free will. So everything is in the book, and you can help me make it a little less not selling at all. Once it's out in English, you can pre-order it right here from the link below. Thank you very much, and hope you read it.